What is this? On July 1st, 2023, NASA recorded a mysterious object named Tri-Eye Atlas. This discovery marked the beginning of observations of a new interstellar body, which is 100 times larger and brighter than Tri-Eye Atlas. Two colossal travelers, one from the distant Oort cloud. More information is needed to understand the nature of this object. Yes, the second came from interstellar space. They arrived just 3 days apart. One shines brighter than expected, while another behaves completely differently than any comet ever recorded. Is it a coincidence or a deliberate coincidence in timing? The sudden appearance of Swan and S2225R2. In early September 2025, astronomers observing the NASA SOHO zone noticed something unexpected on the wide-angle solar camera. A blurred glow appeared against a dark background. At first it was faint, but gradually it intensified night after night. In a few days, this vague shadow turned into an unmistakable sign of a comet, soon designated CU25R2 Swan. Most comets appear unnoticed, icy rocks cataloged and forgotten. Swan, however, became an exception. It quickly became brighter, visible even through amateur telescopes, and seemed to form a tail stretching across the sky. Its orbit was calculated swiftly, and the data surprised everyone. It was not just a visitor. Swan moved along a steep descending trajectory that could take him dangerously close to the sun. Even experienced astronomers were astonished. How could such a bright object have gone unnoticed until now? And why was it already emitting so much material from such a great distance? The discovery sparked a sense of urgency. If this newcomer was more volatile than expected, it could provide a rare opportunity to study unconventional material from the farthest reaches of the solar system. But for other observers, time seemed even stranger. Swan was not approaching alone. Another space traveler, even rarer and more mysterious, was already on the way to its own passage close to the sun. For several weeks, their trajectories would intersect in a way that seemed almost scripted. The corridor of giants. Astronomy is full of coincidences, but some seem too perfectly calculated to ignore. As Swan flared into view, astronomers were already tracking another wanderer. The three-eyed Atlas, only the third confirmed interstellar object ever recorded. Unlike Swan, who likely originated from the distant Oort cloud, the three-eyed Atlas was a true outsider, a body thrown across unimaginable distances of space before drifting into our solar system. The strangest thing was not only that both objects were approaching, but also that their closest passes to the sun would occur just a few days apart. On October 17th, Three-Eyes Atlas will pass perihelion, and just 3 days later, Swan will follow, charting its own path close to the star. Their orbits were vastly different. One comet moved in a retrograde direction, another in a direct one, and their orbital vectors diverged by more than 100 degrees. According to all laws of celestial mechanics, the probability of such two objects being near each other at the same time was extremely low. For astronomers studying cosmic patterns, this event felt like lightning striking the same place twice. Some simply dismissed it as a coincidence that can happen when billions of icy chunks wander through the universe. However, others, more inclined towards conspiracy theories, wondered if this indicated a deeper connection or even a certain design. Nevertheless, one fact remained undeniable. For the first time in human history, Earth was about to witness the meeting of an interstellar visitor and a giant comet, both approaching the sun and sharing a celestial scene. Instruments monitoring them were ready to capture something extraordinary. Information sometimes troubled more than visual images. With the accumulation of orbital data about the comet, calculations showed that its trajectory was almost parabolic, which caused surprise. Perhaps this was its first journey from the Oort cloud into the inner solar system. The eccentricity was nearly 1, and the trajectory's tilt significantly differed from the plane of the planets. The message was clear. This was not an ordinary comet returning for another orbit, but a wanderer recently arrived from the distant corners of the solar system. Nevertheless, it was the subtle measurements that began to spark controversy. The comet's trajectory did not fit the traditional gravitational models. A slight deviation, unrelated to gravity, hinted at something more than just the sublimation of ice. Comets often emit gases, acting like small rocket engines, slightly altering their orbits. But here, the pattern looked uneven, almost stepped. Pulses of force pushed it into the void. The photometric data was also surprising. Even before overheating, the comet, following a smooth curve like most of its kin, suddenly shot a bright flash of light at the end of October, which was recorded by detectors, expanding the comet and stretching its uneven tail. Spectroscopic analysis revealed common components: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. However, Unusually powerful emissions of volatile substances were also discovered. They were not exotic enough to consider the object artificial, but still raised many questions. Together, the data painted a picture of a body that was both familiar and unfamiliar. Astronomers could explain every anomalous phenomenon in traditional terms, but they struggled to do so. Meanwhile, a second set of data related to the interstellar visitor Atlas was about to challenge those explanations even more. If the deviations of the Swan comet sounded like a whisper, then the data of Atlas will soon sound like a scream. The mystery of 3OK Atlas. If Swan caused confusion among astronomers, then 3OK Atlas left them bewildered. From the moment its path was charted, it became clear. This object was an outsider here. Its speed is so great that it cannot be caught by the sun, and its eccentricity exceeds 1. It is not an object of the solar system, but an interstellar messenger, a fragment from a distant system, ejected light years before it came into our view. Interstellar bodies are extremely rare, and until now, only 2 have been confirmed. Oumuamua in 2017, and 2 Iboris in 2019. Atlas became the third and almost immediately began to behave unusually. Its spectrum did not match the usual traces of water observed in comets. Instead, signals of nickel dominated, and the gas ratio shifted significantly towards carbon dioxide, which was much more abundant than astronomers expected. It was not a frozen lump, but something more solid, more metallic, more alien to the solar system. Then the accelerations began. Careful observations showed that Atlas did not move uniformly. On the contrary, his speed changed in jumps, as if pushed by invisible forces. Gas dynamics could explain smooth deviations, but not sharp impulses. Some observers compared it to the maneuvers of a spacecraft using thrusters. Others warned that the unusual geometry of the jets could create similar effects. Nonetheless, the supposed power was astonishing. If this was indeed a pull, it was about gigawatts. Each new dataset brought new contradictions. The object behaved like a comet, but its chemical composition resembled none known. Its trajectory changed as if it were a mechanism adjusting its course. At the same time, no telescope detected a visible source of thrust. Atlas presented space as a paradox, a natural body refusing to behave naturally, appearing just as Comet Swan was about to illuminate the sky. Swan, like a fortress comet. When attention shifted back to Swan, his behavior only heightened the concern. Observers noted fluctuations in brightness that did not match the smooth rhythm of a typical comet. On the contrary, they resembled bursts, brief flashes of light followed by sharp silences, almost like pulsations. In orbital calculations, these bursts coincided with barely noticeable changes in trajectory, reinforcing the feeling that something periodically nudges the object. Theories multiplied at an incredible speed. Some suggested that the core of Swan was covered with an extraordinarily reflective metallic shell, a shell of nickel or cobalt, shimmering in the sunlight. The idea of a protective shell gave rise to bolder guesses that the surrounding coma could function as a plasma shield, absorbing solar radiation and releasing it in controlled bursts. For others, it remained just a fantasy imposed on unclear physical theories. But the image took hold. The notion of Swan as a drifting object, armored and aimed at space, became an integral part of discussions. Calculations of the supposed forces only fueled the debates further. If the acceleration did not come from random gas emissions but was something coordinated, the necessary energy would be colossal, at the level of thousands of gigawatts. This is the power of an entire civilization on a fragile ice globe. This assumption turned out to be provocative. Either something fundamental is missing in the models, or Comet Swan is not what it seems. Most planetary scientists urged caution, as comets are known for their unpredictability. They can suddenly crack, flare up, or disappear without warning. All the oddities associated with Swan could be explained, albeit with difficulty, by exotic yet natural chemistry. Nevertheless, time, scale, and echoes of artificial precision took their toll. In unofficial circles, Swan became not just a comet, but a true mystery. As Swan and the object Atlas approached the sun, a new enigma arose. From October 8th to 18th, the geometry of their orbits placed them almost directly behind the sun from Earth's perspective. For professional observatories, this meant a forced pause. The instruments that usually tracked their path were blinded by sunlight. As a result, the flow of data was interrupted at the most critical moment of their approach. For scientists, such an eclipse was a predictable limitation of celestial mechanics, an inevitable break in observation. However, outside official channels, the lack of information spawned numerous speculations. Astronomy enthusiasts reported difficulties accessing even partial updates from observatories. Some began to whisper that unofficial restrictions had been imposed and that space agencies and defense structures were effectively discouraging publications until the objects moved out of the solar glare. Were these suspicions justified or not? The result was clear. The world watched and waited, aware that two unusual visitors were hidden in plain sight just a few million kilometers away from us, but inaccessible to our instruments. When they disconnect from the sun, the first images and measurements will either dispel doubts or add fuel to the fire. Until then, silence was filled with mystery. Why is this important? For some, Swan and Atlas are just heavenly curiosities, frozen relics from distant worlds that accidentally passed through our sky. For others, they are something much more significant. These two bodies appeared simultaneously not just as objects for study, but as symbols of how little we understand the universe around us. The mere coincidence of their appearance raises questions that science struggles to answer. Their anomalies hint at processes still beyond our models. For an astronomer, meaning holds information, Swan offers a chance to explore matter that may not have changed since the formation of the solar system. The detachment, with its interstellar trajectory, carries the chemistry of an alien stellar cradle. Every photon, every spectral line can change our understanding of the origin of the cosmos. But mysteries extend beyond formulas. Humanity has always looked to the sky in search of meaning, weaving stories from patterns of light. The sudden appearance of two mysterious travelers awakened ancient instincts, evoking both awe and unease. Regardless of whether they were natural phenomena or representatives of something greater, their presence did not go unnoticed. The sky continues to hold secrets that defy explanation. When Swan and Atlas disappear into the abyss again, they will leave behind more questions than answers. Perhaps these are just shards of ice, or maybe something much more significant. However, one thing remains: a reminder that the universe continues to create mysteries beyond our understanding.